Okay. I'm starting recording now, so don't say anything too much familiar in particular or private. Okay. Started recording. So we are here with Athena Carey. I want to introduce her, and I want to stop sharing this. Okay. So I want to introduce her. Apart from the fact that we are good friends, Athena, she's a lot more than only that. She's an alumna, first of all, of Webster University, Geneva. She came to study the photography major, and having already a psychology degree, so she managed to put a few things together, and then moved to London, and she got there an MFA, a Master in Fine Arts with distinction at the University of Creative Arts in London, and she is still now artist in residence. You can see me, right? Or because I can't see myself. But
I see our avatar.
you see an avatar. Okay. Hopefully now you should start seeing me, I hope. Yes. Not that this is fundamental, but then she got several awards. The last one, if I'm not wrong, was last year with the Cameron Award.
Cameron Award. I've got a couple of those, but one of them was the one you're talking about.
Yeah, which is not easy to get, so that's really very good achievement and exciting. She also well known for her long exposure landscapes. Let me see if I manage to share with you some of her images on these. Put this down and select these images here so you can have an idea of what I'm talking about. I hope you can all see the images. So looking at these images, probably you get a reason and an understanding of what we're going to talk about, mindfulness, and I shouldn't put meditation next to mindfulness, or yes, we'll start talking about that, right, in a minute.
About it, yeah.
Yeah. And apart from being a photographer, she's also an excellent teacher. That's why I asked her to join us in teaching in our undergraduate photography program starting from spring 2021. She's also a workshop leader for landscape and mindfulness. Therefore, I thought that she was a good subject to invite to talk about photography. Photography and mindfulness. So we will not go through a presentation, actual presentation, as we have done in the last couple of times, more or less. Decided to have more kind of a dialogue, which is also open to the others if they want to pop in and ask questions, even though I'm going to mute you all for the moment, but don't take it as
With sign language.
yeah, but don't take it as a imposition from my side, but just avoid what happened a couple of times ago. So, Athena, I'm going to stop talking now and I'll let you talk. So the topic is mindfulness. So I'll let you introduce what we're going to talk about, and then I will ask other questions.
So you talked about meditation, just like briefly you mentioned it and asked, should we add it? And it should be mentioned, I think, but it's not really what I'm going to talk about today. It is something that I also do. I find it to be a more advanced version of what we're going to talk about today. So we can almost imagine this as an intro to meditation. It's much easier to do what we're going to talk about today than it is to meditate. A lot of people, I think when they start trying to meditate, they do it maybe because they've been told about all the benefits that there are, and those are very, very valid and true. But it can be very frustrating to start sort of cold like that. I know that's what happened to me when, so many years ago, I had a really stressful situation that I was living through. And, everyone's answer was, well, you should meditate. And so I tried, and it was really frustrating because I've got a crazy monkey mind, and it's all over the place all the time. And to slow that down, I was just not able to do it from that perspective. But sort of through time, I realized that I could do it in other ways. And those are the ways that we're going to talk about today. They're very visual because I'm very visual. But mindfulness, sort of in its base, is fundamentally two really simple things. It's being present and attentive to this moment, the one that we're in right now, the one that just passed, and it's right here and it's coming up. It's just right now. It's only this moment. And really, really important is also to be non-judgmental in this moment. So just let it be what it is and accept what it is. And I think it's also really, really important just in your normal life, but also right now, because so much crazy stuff is going on. Most of us, I think, have no control over it. It's out there and we're reacting to it. And it's really upsetting to feel that you don't have any control over something that's to a large extent dictating our lives right now. And so this gives you a tiny, tiny bit of control back in your life. And it feels really, really good, to be honest. Have you tried it, Francesco? Since we're doing a dialogue, we'll go back and forth. You're muted. Francesco, you're muted.
I hate it. Sorry. My apologies. No, I definitely, I don't think I can call it mindfulness, but I've done meditation and I'm trying to do meditation. I think it is a good exercise. When we are talking about what strikes me is that when people are talking about jogging and physical exercise, everybody agrees that it's helpful. When we are talking about mental exercise and keeping our mind focused, not everybody understands the importance of that. Said that, and I was one of them, and I'm still one of them. It's easier for me to go running than stopping for 30 minutes and trying to be focused. Say that, how is that related to photography? From my perspective, it's really a matter of concentration. And I'm sure that it's not only about photography. So,
No, yeah, it's true. So what you're talking about is what we'll talk about at the end, and it applies to many, many things. Of course, for you and I, fundamentally, it's applying to photography because that's a very focused activity that we do. And I imagine also for quite a few people who are listening right now, that's probably the main reason they're here. But so we'll just jump into it. What I'm going to talk about today is it is like mindfulness, a very simple, complex concept. It's visual attentiveness, essentially. What it really means is just focusing visually. So don't worry about everything else that's in your head or the things that you're hearing or what's going on outside there. It's just to center all of your attention visually on the things that are around you where you are. And I came to it a couple of different ways. I actually came to doing this without realizing I was doing it. I mean, I realized what I was doing, but I didn't realize the sort of psychological effect it was having on me, which is kind of funny because I have a degree in psychology, but you don't ever really know stuff about yourself, right? So when I go out to shoot landscapes or when I go out to do street photography, basically anything that's out in environments that I can't control, what I do when I first get there isn't take photographs. And I imagine that's probably what you do. When you arrive on a scene, you breathe it in almost. You try to understand it on a more intense level. So you stand and you look at it. You're standing on a cliff edge and the ocean is in front of you, and you just breathe it. You sit quietly in that moment before you ever take a camera or a tripod out, and you decide, what does this mean, what I'm looking at? What's the emotion that it has for me? And in that moment, what you're doing is visual attentiveness. You're looking and you're taking it all in that one very moment. And I've been teaching landscape photography students to do this for years. and really only saying to them, you need to know the place that you're photographing, because if you don't know the place, how can you possibly represent it? This is a really important thing to do. And then one day, this is also a few years ago, I was sitting in the dentist office, and you know what that's like. So everyone is stressed out at the dentist office, and I was trying to sort of just manage myself before my turn came, and there happened to be a window nearby. And so rather than dealing with what was coming, what might happen, was, was I going to have a cavity, all of that stuff, I looked out the window and I started mentally to myself saying what I was seeing. So I was seeing a man and he was walking, and with the man was a small boy, and the boy was having to walk, twice as fast to keep up. And there was a church and it was made from bricks, and quite a good deal of time passed and I became really, really calm. So by the time I went in to have my dental appointment, I was not really stressed out at all. And it's because in the moments leading up to my dental appointment, I was living in that current moment. And the reality, even right now, during all of this, is that most of us here, I would imagine, are okay in this very, very moment. And so if you can take the time to focus on this moment that you're living in, you give yourself a break. You allow yourself to be what you actually are, which is okay.
So how do you bring this into your photography? And maybe we could share a website, then people can look at that in the meanwhile we're talking.
What website do you want to share?
Where you have some of your photographs. Because, first of all, you have like 3 Instagram accounts. I always struggle in finding the right one.
So I don't actually have a browser open. Do you want to either share my website or the Instagram?
I can do that. In the meanwhile, you will explain to us how it comes into photography, to your photography.
So I did mention briefly how I'm entering this mental state during landscape photography. It's really about, you turn up on these locations, you've done a lot of work before you ever get there. You've done all the information for how to get there and how to gain access and where you can park, what the weather's going to be like, the sun, the moon, the stars, if they're part of your landscape shoot. But what you don't know is what it's actually going to be like in the moment that you arrive. And that's, to some extent, that's part of the excitement for landscape photographers, because we can work really, really hard to do all the preparation, but it still might be completely different, and it might be way better than we thought, or it might be way worse than we thought, and you don't know until you get there. And so what I do is, in those moments when I first arrive, is I don't unpack anything. I don't take my tripod out. I don't take my camera out. This is what I take out. And the reason I take this out is, after I do my few minutes of sort of standing and deciding what the place feels like to me, I look at it through this, because this focuses my vision and it makes me look at small pieces at a time. And it's sort of twofold. It makes me focus on the very moment, what's happening in the place, but it also helps me with compositions later on, because it forced me to focus through a small window, like a viewfinder, but without the pressure to actually make the photo in that instant. And then in mindfulness workshops, it's a little bit different. We'll have a tiny taste of what I do in those today. It'll be a little bit different. I've never done it like this. I'm used to being in the same place with people who are doing it. So I'm going to have no idea what you're looking at or what your light is like, but it'll be interesting. So that's called, that's sort of an open visual attentiveness. And then, because that sort of, you can finish that and you can actually do that pretty easily on your own. In workshops, we do guided visual awareness as well. And it adds some cues. It's a little bit like being handheld, but it's also in a group. So it changes the dynamics a little bit also.
Let me share. I have your Instagram account. I hope I picked the right one.
I know, because there are like 4 of them.
No, I think it's this one here. Okay, so you can all see here the link to the address. I can actually put it on the chat if you want.
You
I
can.
want to talk about some of these images in relation to mindfulness. And
Well, actually, the first one is a great example. This was a hugely stressful trip that I pretty intentionally set myself up for when I finished my MFA degree, which was also very, very challenging. It was an abrupt end, though. You have this big show, and then and I saw that coming. You've graduated a couple times before, you know what's ahead of you, right? And so I decided to go by myself to rural northern Japan. And in my mind, what I was going there to shoot was a bit challenging because what most people go there to shoot are, if you look at the top image on the right-hand side, is this all these really beautiful trees in the landscape, but they go in the winter when the whole everything is covered in snow and it's very serene. And I challenged myself to go in June, and it's also a place where there's virtually no English spoken. But during the entire time I was there, I would say my stress level was really, really low. So it was a huge struggle for food and to communicate with the people in the hotel for anything that I needed. Also, I didn't know what a Japanese stop sign looks like, and it doesn't look like a stop sign here. So, massive learning experience. But I spent my days in those locations being fully attentive to what was in front of me. And so, most of the rest of what I was experiencing, the stressful things, they didn't matter. It's really, I mean, there'll be less stress. So now we're the top image we're looking at on the left is in Northern Ireland, and the next one is in the Republic of Ireland and then Japan. And it's varying degrees of stressfulness in each of these places. But in all of those moments, you get taken out of sort of the chaos that's running around in your head that you can't control into small pockets of time where nothing is wrong. In fact, in many cases, everything is fantastically wonderful in those type of shooting situations. I'm sure you know that. You've experienced it.
Mm-hmm. My question is, we're talking about a process of, let's say, meditation, basically, and it's through a selection of images because there's a process behind selection of images. So how do you get down to select a certain frame?
Are you talking about when I come back?
Well, no, I'm talking about when you put down your tripod.
Oh, okay.
Something.
So for me, in landscape images, and I would say also a lot for street photography, when I get to the location, I've got my sort of quiet moment with the place. And I'm asking myself questions in this time as well. So I'm taking in what there is, and I'm also asking myself, what does this place make me feel like? And this is perhaps where we leave mindfulness a little bit. It goes into probably we're going towards flow now. So when I'm asking myself, how does this place make me feel? The next question is, what in this place makes me feel that way? And if I'm really strict with myself, I'll make myself choose a single thing. And that single thing is the subject of the image from that place. And
Are
then it
there,
becomes composition and camera technique. We're well into flow at that point.
that was my next question. How much the technical aspect of photography are interfering with your mindfulness process and selection of the image?
Well, I don't think they do. And there's a reason for that, and that's proficiency. So a lot of the things that I'm deciding in those moments, they're like my hands, they're things I've done for so many years now. They don't create a barrier for me in the flow that's happening. Maybe we should do our little tiny mindfulness practice and then come back to flow.
Yeah.
Because I think you can also share about flow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, does everybody have a phone with a camera in it?
So we're going interactive now. I hope everybody can.
And this is like an experiment for me because I've never done this remotely with other people. But essentially, you'll get the idea of it. It's something that you can do in any environment. I mean, I was doing it in the dentist's office minus the camera. And the more times you do it, the better you'll get at it, which I know we say that about everything, but it takes some time to learn to focus yourself in such a narrow way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take 3 really deep breaths, and I'm going to tell you things to do during each one. And then the taking pictures part is a sort of a 3-part process, and I'm going to guide you through it a couple times, and then you're going to do it on your own a couple times, okay? So is everybody ready to start? Okay, so in the place that you are, we're not going to have to go anywhere. You're just going to look at whatever is around you. It doesn't matter. And I want you now to take a really deep breath in. And when you exhale this time, I want you to drop your shoulders down. And then take another really deep breath in. And this time, when you let out a long, slow breath, relax your forehead. And then on your third really deep breath in, on your long, slow exhale, I want you to soften your tummy. And now let your breath go back to normal. You don't have to focus on it. You can time the next things we do with your breath if that makes you happy. If it doesn't, then you don't have to. But I'd like for you to pick up your camera now. And in your area, we're going to do 3 steps. And in the first step, so just go ahead and do it now with me. This is the only place that you're going to look. So don't look outside here, only look at things through your camera. And the first step, I want you to find an object, looking at it through your camera, and in your head, really quietly, say its name. And then the second part is to describe the object. I want you to be really non-judgmental. So just use adjectives like describe its color or its texture or its weight. And in the third step, you're going to take a photo of this object, but don't overthink it. If you're a photographer and composition is important to you, that's fine, but don't actively think about the composition. Just make it. It's not about how beautiful these photos are, which you'll see later. And then we're going to start right back over. So don't linger on this object. It's time now to go to the next object, looking only through here. Say in your mind its name, and then quietly in your mind, non-judgmentally, describe this object, and then take a photo. And now you're going to repeat about 3 or 4 more times without me telling you each step. And I'm going to not be super quiet, but kind of quiet so you can focus. Remember, when you're quietly describing your object, not to make it judgmental. Don't add a narrative. It's just a thing. If you're in a very small space, you can do the same object more than once. And if you get distracted from the task, smile, that part's important, and just bring yourself back. It's really, really common to get distracted. And now let the next object you choose be the last one. Is everybody ready? That was so fabulous for me to watch. I had to remind myself like I should be saying things. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I want to show you. Yesterday I sat right here and I did it. And I have to tell you that I'm absolutely mortified to show you what my desk looks like, but I feel like you deserve that so that you can see what I started from. And then I'm going to show you the pictures that I took. I did it obviously by myself. So sharing is it the little square with the arrow? Francesco?
Pardon me?
Is sharing the little square with the arrow?
Yeah. That's it.
Okay, so let me put the pictures up on the other screen and I'll come over here and share that. And I think it's this one.
Yep.
Do you see anything?
I see a black screen with an arrow moving on top of it.
Okay, it's not that one. So how do I come back out of it then?
You go on the top of the screen and you see
Oh, I
something
see.
orange appearing. Yeah.
So let's try the other one. Now what do you see?
Now I see a folder.
No, because I see nothing actually.
I see a green desktop. Now I see a folder, visual attention.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to back out. And you see like some stamps? But I can't actually, I want to show them all to you because I promised to be mortified and show you my desk. So that's what I have to do. So this is what my desk looks like. My desk is chaos. And so the first thing you can sort of latch onto is that I just described my desk and it was not a non-judgmental work. My desk is basically a collection of things I need to do. And that is also a not a non-judgmental way to share. So this is where I started from. And these are the photos that I made. They are not masterpieces. Look, you can see my fingers in the cup. They're nothing that I'm ever going to print. I may, in fact, just delete them all when we're finished here. But in the moments, that's a paw print for my cat. In the moments that I was taking these, there was zero stress for me. I was completely focused on what I was doing in this moment. And that's the only thing that's important. So yes, I have a whole bunch of photos, but what to do with them next, it's entirely up to you. The really important thing was the 5 or 10 or 15 minutes that you spent stress-free taking those photos for this. I'm not saying that you should never make beautiful photos. I want everyone to make beautiful photos, but that's not the point of this exercise. So what you can do with these are probably three things. You can delete them. That's probably what I'm going to do with these because I got what I needed from these photos already. You can, another thing that I'm doing is I have during the lockdown, which we in the UK are still pretty much in, I've been keeping a journal and I don't journal. I am not a journaler. Journal makes you think of words and I'm not a words person. But in this case, what I've been doing is selecting 1 or 2 or 3 photographs that I've taken every day. And I take so many photos every day and most of them get deleted. But I'm dropping them into a journaling app and adding a few words, maybe how I felt or literally what I was doing or a description of what's in the photos. But what that gives me is control. We're in a period of time right now where we feel out of control and not able to control the things that are upsetting us. And so by putting these photos and these little thoughts of mine into this journal, I'm taking this time as mine. And I can keep it forever or not forever. It doesn't matter. Right now, it's giving me some tiny sense of control, which is very beneficial on a psychological level. The third thing that you could do with them, even if you're taking them on a phone, is to edit them. Because editing is another way that you can focus your attention. So on a phone, you can use something like Snapseed. You'd be really surprised going through all of the ways that you can edit a photo, how much time you can lose. And that's where we're going into flow then. So flow is what, when we talked about this before, you mentioned to me what you experienced during photography 8x10 analog film photography in particular. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, when you were mentioning mindfulness in our previous meetings, let's say, um, for me, it was inevitable to think about how you are working, basically. And you enter in a flow, which is, I've done also Vipassana meditation, and Vipassana meditation actually, it's a bit tough, and it is about a flow. Basically, they tell you to, it's a technique. It's not that when you meditate, you are kind of a isolated guru, but it's a specific technique. And taking photographs with a large format camera takes you off the routine, the daily routine, and brings you to be very much concentrated on what you're doing because you cannot mistake every single step. So that's why I asked before how much the technical aspects are influencing your mindfulness approach. Because actually, when you are taking a large format photograph, first of all, you have to select the image, you have to put down the tripod and even open the camera. It's one step after the other. And then putting the film in and just getting to the point of taking the photograph, it's a flow and you have to be concentrated. So that is already part of meditation and it brings you to be in a different state of mind, which I miss now because I'm not doing large photography
It's
anymore.
relief. It's relief. So inside flow, it's very, very similar for visual artists to what we just did and what we were talking about, but it has some conditions to actually happen. So we've all probably been in flow at some point, whether it was photography or some other activity. And it's kind of, people describe it as being in the zone and losing track of time or losing time. It's where you become almost hyper focused on something that you're doing. And some of the conditions that go into achieving that state are you start off by having a well-defined goal, an activity it has limits. You understand what it is, and it's in front of you to do. And another thing that helps you to get into the flow is that while you're doing this activity, you have sort of immediate and pretty clear feedback to how well you're doing it. And then a really important part, and this is where my comment before about the technical aspects comes in, is that there needs to be a very good balance between the challenge that you have before you, the requirements of it, and your existing ability and your confidence that you can meet that goal. So when those things all come together, you have perfect conditions to sort of enter into this flow state. And when you're in this flow state, you lose track of time, you're hyper concentrated on a specific thing. And despite the fact that you probably do end up making something that's wonderful, like, the photos that you like that you've taken, it becomes a process of doing for the sake of doing. So it becomes autotelic. And that's a really fulfilling and comfortable state to be in. It's, I would say, the next 10 steps past just visual awareness. There's a real sense of satisfaction that you get from that. But because it's so mindful, you get all the same mindfulness benefits that you get from, visual attention and from meditation. You get, less stress and you get less sadness and you get less anger and less frustration and more happiness and more patience and more compassion.
I have a question, and of course, I want to open this to anyone else who wants to ask questions. Um, you have a psychology background, and now I would say deep photography background. I mean, the silly question would be how much they influence each other, but this is not the question. The question is, did you arrive to photography because of your psychology background?
First of all, I don't think the first question was silly. The answer to the first question is all the time. I would say that for me, psychology and photography are like this. Because for me, psychology, it sort of creates the meaning inside the images that I make. And I I mean, while I do take images like this just for a therapeutic thing, a lot of the work that I do, it has a very deep meaning, whether it's the landscape images or the conceptual photography that, this stuff that I did for my MFA. Um, to answer your second question, I actually, so when I was a child, well, my godparents lived in Switzerland and my parents lived in the United States. And when I was 9, they decided I was old enough to go visit them on my own this time. And my mom handed me her Kodak instant camera. And that was my first experience with photography. And I got to do it alone because she gave it to me and then she sent me away with it. So there I was in Switzerland, which is, breathtakingly beautiful. And I was 9 years old and I had a camera. And that's when I sort of learned that I could take pieces away with me through that camera. But my dad's also a psychologist, so that's always also been there. So maybe that's also the answer. It's like that.
I said silly because for me the answer was obvious.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm not a psychologist. I never studied psychology, even though now with my PhD research I'm getting into it. Of course, it's inevitable that photography and psychology are connected. And personally, I feel that photography is very selfish and lonely activity. It's tough to be in a group when you photograph, and you need to be by yourself. Of course, then you can have a group, you can do that.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. When I'm in a group of photographers, I absolutely love it. I have a fantastic time. I love leading workshops. I love being a participant in workshops, but it is not the same as when I plan and go out all by myself. It's not, it's almost like it's a completely different activity.
So I want to open this to anyone for questions. Don't you have any question for Athena? It can be technical, it can be psychological, it can be how do you manage to take such wonderful landscapes, or why black and white? I mean, I don't want to ask all these questions, but
One at a time, please.
don't be shy. I mean,
I have a question, sort of, maybe.
it's
Hi.
your right.
So you said that like in the state of flow, you have like a well-defined goal, right?
Mhm.
And so I see how that works with like landscape photography, where you like, or studio photography, where you have a place and you know like what the setup's going to be. But if you're going out to do something like street photography, where the goal is to just take a good picture, and you can't really control like the situation you're in, does that still can you still define it as a well-defined goal?
Is actually. So I really, really like street photography, even though I wouldn't consider it or even like tell people that it's a genre that I'm good at. I really, really enjoy it. And the reason I enjoy it is because I think it's like fast track into flow and there's heavy concentration. But maybe it's because of the way that I shoot street photography, which is I go to a specific location. So there you are with the location. And I decide ahead of time everything except the subject of a street photography image. So I've got the whole composition. It's a really strange thing to say, but it's like hunting. I'm set up and I'm waiting for the perfect person to walk into the perfect place. And so for that to happen, concentration is insanely high. I mean, the days that I've gone into London and done this all day long and then come home, I feel like I'm glowing. It's that flowy. Do you do street photography?
Yeah, I've been getting into it.
How do you do it? Do you use that technique, or are you just sort of waiting for everything around you to happen into the perfect snap the moment?
I normally well, what I normally like I go out on my bike and just look for places, because at this like I basically I go scout places, and then if I like it and I haven't gotten anything, I'll come back like the next day or something. Um, but if not, I'll hang around there for a while and see what happens. But
Definitely try that. Definitely. Because I think one of the things about street photography, when you see street photography that is really appealing, one of the things about it is that everything seems to have lined up just perfectly. It's like it's Cartier-Bresson's decisive moment.
right.
And I I think it's really rare, actually, that those decisive moments happen in a chaotic way. I think people go and they don't necessarily set it up and say, hey, can you do this? Although I'm sure some people do, but they control as many elements as they can. And that's where you can find yourself into the flow.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking a question.
Well, you meet in one of the future classes in spring. Yusuf is a media studies student, and we just completed our photojournalist class in a lockdown condition. So I laughed when you said street photographer because we tried, but of course it could not be street photography, but kind of. But it was an excellent
With
result.
me in the spring, Yusuf.
I need to find out. I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
I'll take something for sure, though.
Well, Athena was supposed to come to our Tuscany trip this year. And Yusuf was supposed to be in our Tuscany trip this year. So for everyone, in the other 37 people in this group right now wondering what we're talking about, I'm sorry, but we at Webster University, we run a class in Tuscany every year since 2007. And I was supposed to take the students to Tuscany this year as well, but then, of course, as you understand, it's been canceled, and we have to convert that class into something completely different from an experiential on the field, in the field photography class to an online remotely taught class on visuals, but we managed to do it. And Athena was part of the group because I wanted her to be involved. And anyways.
It was impressive.
One of the things we wanted to introduce was this mindfulness approach, which is also part of the class because walking, which is something we're doing in the class, is part of that because walking and not just jumping outside and have a quick walk, but walking on like a Santiago de Compostela path or the Via Francigena path is something like that. So do we have other questions?
I have a question, Athena. Hey, hey, I really like your technique in the dentist's office. I can really relate to that.
I can't tell you how many situations since I've realized that I've used it in.
Yeah. So my question is, I can understand seeing a man walking with a boy, and that keeps you in the moment. But when you're in the dentist chair and they're drilling on your tooth, are you still? It's a serious question, but it's funny.
I would say, okay, so you know how people tell you to go to your special place? That's the alternative when the moment is not actually okay.
Okay.
Remember, the premise was that everything bad is not in this moment, so be in this moment. When that's not true, go to your special place.
Okay. I was just wondering if you're in the chair, are you thinking about that man walking with the boy?
Oh no, I have a special place. It's a seaside place. What's your special place?
Seaside beach. We live about 5 miles from the beach, so.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I would say go there while you're in the dentist chair.
Okay, thanks.
So we have a question from Rach. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Anyways, Athena, do you always do a lot of research before visiting a location for the first time, or do you sometimes wing them? I like to not have a preconceived idea of what a place should look like to feel a bit like it is my own little discovery.
Rachel, is this you? Nod. Yes. Oh, okay. So I'm a control freak.
I feel
So
like a
the answer
newcomer.
is pretty much yes. I do an insane amount of research before I go to pretty much everywhere. You began planning a trip with me, so you know that that's true. I think it's also, though, because I teach workshops, and if you're going to take people to places, you really got to know everything. You have to have contingencies. You just have to know everything, and that's just, maybe that's why I do workshops, or maybe I'm like that because I do workshops. I'm not sure, but I think when we get out of lockdown, the idea of just going to a place and having it not be preconceived sounds really good.
Well, I personally, I don't know if it is of interest, but I think that a little bit of research is always quite important. Maybe not the specific place, but the region in general, to know where to go and what to expect to find.
Yeah.
Another question from Lori. Have you seen any particular photographers who you think have captured these era of lockdown and psychological state we are in?
Wow, I think we're too in it, to be honest, to determine that right now. I also think that due to the restrictions that everyone's living in, there's going to be in this period of time quite a shift about who tells the story. So typically photojournalists are out and they're telling the story on behalf of the people experiencing the story. But I think what we're finding right now is people are telling their own stories, and they're doing it with things like this, and it's firsthand, and it's going to be, even for those of us who are experiencing the telling, it's going to be a very different experience to experience the telling from the first hand versus a retelling from somebody who's telling somebody else's story, if that makes sense. And I don't know if that's going to stick, if going forward that's going to be how we're going to do things. I don't think that there will not be a need for photojournalists, but I think that what they do might shift to be a slightly more curatorial thing. But to come back and answer your question, because I really hate it when people ask questions and then they answer something else, is I think we're going to have to wait. We're going to have to wait until we get a little bit further through it. It's sort of like trying to see the whole forest when you're standing in the middle of it.
We have a question from Facebook. I mean, not from Facebook, but from Ross.
Yay!
Ross, who's following us on Facebook. Do you need to be alone to enter flow?
Oh, that's a very good question. No. The short answer is no. The condition is, how good are you? How good are you at getting into flow? It's I can't remember the quote exactly. The quote is about calm, and it's about calm not being to be in a place that's without distraction. It's to be in your own space without distraction when there's chaos around you. So you can definitely get into flow when other people are with you, when there are other things around you. It's easier when you're alone, particularly if the other things around you are trying to interact with you. So yes, you can do it with other people, and yes, it's easier if you're alone.
Can I integrate the answer?
Please do.
You know, because we are talking about flow and it's connected to meditation, and I could not avoid to think about a meditation vipassana. You are in the same room all together, and of course you are by yourself, but you're in a group. And being together with all the rest helps you to get into your own flow. And bringing it to photography, I can tell you that I've done a lot of landscape photography with large format, and you are by yourself, and you are in your own flow. But just to give you an example, when I go to Tuscany with the students, and we did large format photography, everyone was working by himself or herself. So everyone was in his own or her own flow. So we were together, and that was a bit more powerful than just being alone. So for me, you are always a little bit alone, but being in a group reinforced that strength.
Especially if you're all working on the same or very related task.
Yeah. Any other curiosity? Well, there was a message from Aline. And sorry, Aline, I didn't read it before because it's not a specific question, but I'm going to read it. Aline said, my dentist chair experience was the first earthquake we had in Washington, D.C. Wish I had my camera at the time. Well, I'm writing backwards, but you get an earthquake, dentist chair. Where did the dentist run to?
Where did the dentist run to?
Yeah, that's the message I'm reading.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand.
You can talk.
No, I just say that this is where we have words and pictures coming together, because I could not make a picture without the words. You know, I would love to take a picture looking up at that lamp. You know how they have them and they swing back and forth, and then you say, where's the dentist? And nobody's there. You don't have your iPhone. And I just related that back to what you said about the dentist. But I really loved what you said about psychology and photography. I cannot imagine a better match in the whole world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm sorry you went through an earthquake in what was already a really stressful situation.
I think I was just having a checkup, but anyway, everyone loaded out of the building and I was there alone and the lamp was swinging back and forth. So without the words, the photo would be, it had to be matched with the words. You know what I mean?
That's a very surreal experience. I mean, on the one hand, I'm a little bit jealous because it sounds pretty amazing and you didn't get hurt. And on the other hand, I'm sorry that you had such a stressful experience.
Well, it was just totally weird. The epicenter was in Virginia, and I got back to my house in Bethesda, and everything was collapsed on the floor. Anyway, I really loved your presentation.
Thank you, Ed.
Bill, I see you raise your hand here. You have a question? You want to say something? Wait a minute. I think
Sorry.
the microphone. Okay.
I think I'm back. I was just going to say something that is very much to reinforce what Athena and you have been saying. Back in the 1980s, I worked in refugee camps in Central America as a photographer. And these are in the film days, you know, just walking around with a Leica. But the ability to focus in the midst of a chaotic situation sometimes, it's just part of who you are as a photographer. And in recent years, I've been photographing what is left of the Shakers, an 18th century utopian community that still exists in the United States. Completely different. And yet it's the same kind of internal focus. When you're working as a photographer, if you're really a photographer, you are seeing light and reacting to light. And whenever I'm actually working as a photographer, I am just in a different place. And it is very much the same kind of internal place I find that when I am meditating. So I just wanted to say everything you've been saying makes total sense to me.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that story. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Do you find when you don't have your camera that sometimes you go into that space through the same method, through light?
Oh, of course. Of course. In fact, I'm sure that you've both said the same thing, but in photo classes, I have more than once said to students, you know you are a photographer when you walk into a situation and you realize that what you are seeing is the light.
Exactly. Yeah. It's comforting.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And I would say when you're without the camera, you take the best photographs, right?
Isn't it sad?
It is. But I'm sure you can confirm this, right? That, oh God, this is the best photograph ever, and I don't have my camera. And
Sure.
Always have one
Well,
now.
when I was starting out, I will tell you, I kept a little notebook that when I was in places, I would make notes about what I would come back and photograph, and it never worked. It's never the same thing. So I stopped doing that.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, do we have other questions? We have another couple of minutes. Then I want to introduce the topic of the next time. But Athena is here, so I think it's been intense. I have a question actually for everyone. I would like to know how many.
Francesco.
Yes.
There's another one from Facebook. Poppy has asked, in a workshop, do you not find it difficult to get back into your own space after talking with someone else?
Like to do photography, yeah, I don't generally do photography when I'm leading workshops. I'll set up and do it mostly for the people around me, because if you don't set up, it says two things. It says, this place isn't worth shooting. And that's very disappointing if you're a participant and the leader is projecting that. And also because people want to know what you would shoot, even if you're not going to shoot. They want to see what you're going to do, how you set up, even if it's really just how you take your camera out and put it on the tripod. So I do set up and I'll take pictures with people watching if they want to see what I would do, but generally I'm not taking pictures on workshops. I'm walking back and forth between all the people as they're taking pictures. Ted knows what that's like. I see you, Ted. Ted's been on a workshop with me. Stuart's been on a photo walk with me. And he knows that I talk a lot, even though I don't really talk a lot.
Usually, you know, when I run workshops, I need to have my camera with me, and I have to find a way to create my little own space one day, and not the whole week or the 10 days. But I
I'm
need a
going
certain
ahead.
tool.
So usually I'll go, if it's a location workshop, I'll be there the week before, at the bare minimum, a couple of days before for that, but also because I want to check that everything's still there.
Okay, other questions or comments? We will have, thank you, Athena. This has been great, and we are not done with this because we're going to continue the conversation, I'm sure. And thank you, Rachel, for being up at 4 a.m. to be here with us. I want to share with you, I mean, you will receive the information, but okay, here the next event will be on the 28th, Thursday, 6 o'clock. We'll talk Vlad, who's the head of psychology at Webster University, and an expert in creativity. He will talk about immobility and impossibility, creativity in the age of coronavirus. So it's really much connected also with what we talked about today. So not only photography, of course, but other things connected to creativity. So if you're interested in what we're doing, we'll be happy to welcome you back again in my room and my WebEx room. And of course, we had our events afterwards. Bill, I'm very happy to have you or people from St. Louis who are willing to talk about photography or visual arts or topics, current topics. And it would be nice to have a voice from the States. Julie Smith will be presenting something on June the 11th, I think. That could be, I mean, our schedule is already filled up until June, and then I will stop for July and August, but we can talk about September and October. So
let's talk.
Any kind of proposal. So please think about that.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, so it's 7 o'clock sharp. I'm not Swiss, I'm Italian, but I want to be precise. So I'm going to close it here, unless there are comments. I don't want to close your mouths, but I'm going to stop. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Everybody who came to listen to me ramble.
Thank you very much.